Apologies as our screen froze at some point, but I think it should be all updated. Thank you for pointing that out.
So I thought I would highlight a little bit about the process and the significant stakeholder engagement that we had to for this project. Originally, we sent out a survey. It was a statewide survey to solicit input on how the framework could be strengthened to reflect current research and also meet the needs of the early childhood community in Colorado. So we were thrilled to have 632 respondents. It really validated some of the themes that we had been hearing anecdotally about the need to update the framework. You know, people responded that they really wanted to see reduced text, very specifically for strategies for action, but also overall. And they also wanted to see an increased integration among the domains. And so the original framework had 4 domains: early learning, family support and parent education, health, and mental health and social emotional development. And some of the feedback we received was that people who related to one of the domains really spent a lot of time thinking about what was included, what the outcomes that were included in, for example, early learning. They didn't spend a lot of time thinking about the outcomes that were in health. And so we really wanted to continue to work on breaking down silos, and so there was a strong interest in showing more integration. And then some of the other feedback we heard was that we really, folks really needed us to think more strategically and articulate a better vision for prenatal through age 3, in addition to the integration between early childhood and K-3 and a better articulation of the supports for kindergarten through 3rd grade. So we think that we were able to accomplish that in the revised framework. So we took that information and we, as a framework steering committee, we spent time thinking about how we could incorporate those changes into a revised draft. As I mentioned, we quickly realized that people also, in order to reduce the text, they still wanted to tell the story and use the document to convey a message. The system is so comprehensive that it needed to be very broad, and so we quickly brought on a graphic designer who helped us articulate the message in a more visually appealing way. Then we took the revised draft out on the street, and before I jump there, I just want to mention a couple of things. Before we took the revised draft out, we actually, once we distilled some high-level themes, we held 5 focus groups, and we had 79 participants in those 5 focus groups, and we really used them to take a deeper dive into what stakeholders wanted and needed in the updated framework so that we could hone in on specific areas that needed enhancement. So we really brainstormed some ideas for how to show, for example, the relationship between the child and family, since everyone believed that a family is a child's first teacher. And we also wanted to expand the importance of how other adults influence the child and family and the touch points within the environment that the family live, such as neighborhoods, programs, schools, and how those people and places are influenced by local and state systems, such as policy. We also talked a lot about the integration of health and social, emotional, and mental health. While we were doing that, we also conducted a literature review. We reviewed 10 national documents, and I won't review the entire list, but give you a sense of what they were. We looked at the Alliance for Early Success Birth through 8 state policy framework. We looked at the Foundations of Lifelong Health, our built-in early childhood. We looked at the Essentials for Childhood framework in addition to the Strengthening Families framework. We looked at 0 to 3 and work on inclusion, and really helped, the literature review really helped us think about new and emerging and best practices so that we could ensure that we were creating a progressive framework that would be relevant to our work for the next 5 years. So then we took out the revised framework and we held 10 statewide stakeholder vetting meetings. We had 4 in the Denver metro area, 6 in the Denver metro area, and they were statewide coalitions that were already convening, so we were able to leverage some meeting time and also get a variety of stakeholders from across the state. In addition, we had 4 regional meetings where we were able to go out to local communities across the state, Glenwood Springs, Greeley, Pueblo, Alamosa, in addition to a webinar to get feedback. So when we were out on the tour and engaging stakeholders and, providing an overview of the revisions and getting their feedback on things that work, things didn't work, areas that we could improve, things that we were missing, we asked the participants to what degree did they see their work within the framework. We were really excited to hear that 72% responded very much and 24% responded somewhat. So we knew that a large percentage of the people who were at these meetings saw their work within the framework. We also asked them how enthusiastic they were about the updated framework, and 94% responded enthusiastic and supportive. So from there, we distilled their feedback into some themes, and we made and had lengthy conversations with the Framework Steering Committee about the revisions that we should incorporate before finalizing the framework. Once the framework was finalized, we sent it out for national expert review to make sure we weren't missing any big components of research and to vet the work with national colleagues. So we had an expert within culture and diverse populations review it, in addition to 0 to 3 and special education, health and equity, and policy and systems, and of course then took one last pass over the framework. Framework Steering Committee made some decisions, and the final version of the Early Childhood Framework was ready for release. So now I'm going to provide an overview of some of the changes. We really feel like the framework represents best and promising practices. It's very progressive, as was the original framework. It's also inclusive of prenatal through grade 3 and informal care. There's been an increased demonstration of the integration of the system sectors, as well as describing a child's development within the context of the family, the other adult relationships that impact that child and family, the environments with which that family lives and goes to school and works, in addition to the local and state systems within Colorado. We believe it defines, another section here is the results. These results really define a well-functioning early childhood system. This is new to the Early Childhood Framework, and it describes what would happen as a result of a well-functioning system. Of course, the icons and the color scheme have also been updated. So the Early Childhood Colorado Framework is intended to communicate a vision for Colorado's early childhood comprehensive system. It allows partners to see themselves where they contribute and opportunities for alignment. It highlights the important role, responsibility, and expertise of each system sector or domain, as well as demonstrating an interconnectedness and a holistic approach to ensuring children reach their developmental potential. Ultimately, the Early Childhood Colorado Framework is intended to mobilize action to achieve a shared vision that all children are valued, healthy, and thriving. So I'll call your attention first to the core principles section. This section is based on and guided by a set of principles to ensure young children reach their developmental potential and are ready to succeed in school and life. These principles also describe an approach to working with families. For example, in order to achieve the vision within the framework, one must approach working with children and families from a strengths-based perspective and also be culturally responsive. On the back of the framework, we also recognize that this effort was made possible and is embraced by the ECLC Foundation, state agencies, nonprofits, and early childhood stakeholders across the state. And we also wanted to call attention that this is not something new for the state of Colorado. This was originally created and adopted in 2008 and merely updated in July of 2015. On the inside of the framework, you'll find that it provides a broad overview of the comprehensive early childhood system. You'll notice that it does not specifically reference initiatives or programs by name, but it seeks to define what we will see when programs, initiatives, and approaches are implemented and achieve success. It reads from left to right, starting with the fundamentals. So the fundamentals section describes the essential elements that are the foundation of our early childhood system. It describes what must exist in communities of practice and state and local systems in order to achieve results for children and families. The fundamentals were described in the original framework using the term foundations, and we thought it was important to show how the progress that Colorado has made in the past 7 years. So, for example, it's essential to realizing the vision of the framework to have strong partnerships. Not one entity can do it alone, and it's also important to have effective leadership within organizations, communities, and families. The next section is strategies for action. This section lists broad strategies that apply across all sectors or domains. So they're applicable to family support and education, health and well-being, and learning and development. They're no longer specific and primarily focused on the early learning domain. It's really not meant to be an exhaustive list, but meant to provide strategies that organizations and entities, communities should consider based on the goals and needs of their community. This section in the original framework was very text heavy, and so we gained a lot of real estate in the Early Childhood Colorado framework by bringing the strategies up to a meaningful phrase that, like I said, could be used by any of the 3 sectors. So one example of the change within the new framework, it states develop and retain the workforce. And it speaks to strategies being implemented with the Early Learning Challenge Grant to strengthen support for early childhood professionals based on a shared set of early childhood competencies and credentials, which was also stated as a strategy within the original framework. I'll turn your attention now to the outcomes section. This area is focused on the sectors or domains of family support and education, health and well-being, and learning and development. In the original framework, we referred to it as the 4 domains. So one of the biggest changes in this section is that health and social, emotional, and mental health have been merged into health and well-being. This was something that we had a lot of conversations with stakeholders about. There was concern that we would lose the emphasis on mental health and social emotional development by combining the 2. However, we also recognize that there's a trend towards integrating the 2, mental health and well-being services, into primary care services. And so we thought the Framework Steering Committee thought that this was an important step in the revised framework. Let's see. The outcomes really help partners and communities identify where there are opportunities, barriers, and gaps within their local community system. It provides a roadmap to mobilizing action and enabling highly effective community planning, resource development, and coordinated service delivery. One of the other changes I'll note, early learning was in the original 2008 framework, and that's been expanded to read learning and development, really out of a commitment to highlighting the development that happens 0 to 3, in addition to the learning and development that continues to happen in K-3. There was an intentional focus on broadening the language to include informal care providers, family, friend, and neighbor care, as well as K-3 teachers. One of the other really big changes that happened in this section, the original framework, as I mentioned, was organized by domains. And so, as you may recall, when we did the original survey and focus groups, we received a lot of feedback about being intentional about the integration of this work. And so the Framework Steering Committee decided that the revised framework, instead of being organized by domain, would be better suited for the outcomes to be organized by access, quality, and equity. So the access section really recognizes the availability of services. Quality recognizes that it's not enough for services to simply exist, but they must meet a standard of quality. And equity recognizes that special populations need special attention. So I'll now call your attention to the green section. All children valued, healthy, and thriving. That remains Colorado's vision for a comprehensive early childhood system. It's unchanged from the original 2008 version. However, the rest of this section has seen some significant revisions. We included a graphic, the system graphic. It's new to the framework. It clearly defines Colorado's early childhood system as prenatal through age 8 or 3rd grade and highlights the continuum of early childhood and K-3. So as I mentioned, we convened the Framework Steering Committee and we had some K-3 expertise that served. And you know, we talked about, oh, is it kindergartners and then is it 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds, and one of the things that our K-3 experts were able to tell us is, of course, a teacher doesn't define herself in the K-3 system as a 6-year-old teacher or 7-year-old teacher. So in order to integrate them and encourage them to see themselves within the revised framework, it was important to speak to it as 1st graders, 2nd graders, 3rd graders. The other thing I'll highlight, we really had a lot of conversations around how to bring the family and recognize the important role that a family serves in a child's life. And so as you see in this green graphic, we have the child and the family within the same circle, which we believe really accentuates the unique and important relationship that exists there. Drawing your attention to the results section, as I mentioned, this is a new section. It's been updated from the goals in the original framework. The goals in the original framework, for example, they read children have high quality early learning supports and environments and comprehensive health care. So they described what you would see in the system if it was well functioning. And in the revised framework, it really talks about the results that will happen as a result of a well-functioning early childhood system. So for example, there's a child result. It's not that the children will have access to high-quality early learning and comprehensive health care. It's that young children will reach their developmental potential and are ready to succeed in life. It's that adults are knowledgeable, responsive, and interact effectively with and on behalf of children. And of course, it's important that environments that impact children are safe, stable, and supportive. And it's also important, we wanted to highlight that the benefit to local and state systems is that they attain economic and social benefits by prioritizing children and families. So I thought I'd highlight a couple of success stories. You may be familiar with this. I know that some of you on the phone have a deep knowledge of the original and hopefully the revised Childhood Colorado Framework, and some may be new to the Early Childhood Colorado Framework. So I thought I'd share a success story from the Montelorus Early Childhood Council. This council serves Montezuma and Dolores counties, including the Mountain Ute Reservation. And so when we asked Banshee McCoy, the executive director of this Early Childhood Council, how she had used the framework, she highlighted a few things in how they had used the 2008 framework to think strategically about actions, things that they were going to do, how that would impact their goals, their mission, their vision. And they used it to weigh whether an activity or a proposal or a strategy really fits into this framework. And they have also recreated the framework to include the programs, initiatives, efforts that they have within each of the domains to help communicate, especially to new council members, the work of the Early Childhood Council and the activities that they're doing, the work that they're doing across and within the different areas of the early childhood framework. One other story I'll share, when the original 2008 framework came out, of course there wasn't a lot of conversation around the importance of early childhood programs, providers, directors, advocates, working closely with healthcare providers so that all children could reach their developmental potential. Those two domains were, working respectively in their fields. And so the Colorado Trust began to do some strategic thinking about how could we bring together the early childhood community and field with the healthcare professionals so that children could be more successful and there could be intentional strategies that were being implemented in communities. And so the Colorado Trust awarded $5.75 million over 5 years. That funding was awarded to 25 out of 31 councils. We currently have 31 early childhood councils. They're serving 58 of the 64 counties. So this funding had a wide reach across the state. And the purpose of this funding was to build partnerships between early learning and health and establish common goals and objectives. So really cross-sector collaboration, silo busting. In one community, they used their grant to have meetings between the early childhood community and the early childhood providers and professionals and the healthcare providers. And what they quickly realized was that there was a lot of duplication in screening, that oftentimes people didn't know where to refer children, that oftentimes there was no communication around any type of intervention that needed to happen with a child. And so they have worked on this initiative for, I want to say 6 or 7 years, and really started to roadmap and identify their screening, referral, and follow-up process and work very closely together to make sure that everyone was aware of a child's individual educational plan, that families had the resources they need to make sure that their child was as successful as possible. So this really exemplifies Colorado's collaboration and the strong public-private approaches used to leverage resources and maximize investments. So very quickly, this Early Childhood Colorado framework was around $100,000 to update. We were very grateful to receive and to establish a public-private partnership and receive funding from those listed on the screen. We also quickly realized that people need access to these resources. There are, as I mentioned, 64 counties across the state. Many of them are rural, and there's a responsibility to those of us who are representing the state of Colorado or statewide coalitions to ensure that everybody has access to information and resources in a timely manner. And so it was decided that that there would be a website. It's earlychildhoodframework.org. When you go to that website, you can download the framework in English and in Spanish. There is a great poster that's also available in addition to framework graphics. So if there's a particular icon that you would like to use and pull into your strategic plan or put on a flyer or use in a brochure, all of these things are available to communities so that we can begin to see the alignment and coordination of our work as a comprehensive early childhood system, no matter where you fit within this system. So please visit earlychildhoodframework.org. I'm going to kick it over to Hannah now, and we're going to spend a little bit of time hearing from you, doing some polling, and asking you a few questions.
Yeah, so thanks, Cheryl, for sharing all of that. And I think a note on the toolkit at the end, it has been very helpful already for, I know, multiple partners, but for the partnership we've already used, for example, the posters the laminated posters already in multiple meetings. The laminated posters are so nice because you can dry erase mark on them and put sticky dots on them and then clean it all off afterwards. So the toolkit is great for the posters and for the other items as well. And before we move on to polling and further discussion on how the partnership plans to interact with the framework, I want to just quickly pause and give a couple minutes for if anybody has questions for Cheryl or questions thus far. We have enough people on the webinar that we don't want to unmute everybody because there tends to be too much background noise, but if you do have any quick questions, please go ahead and type them either in the question box or in the chat box at the bottom of your GoToWebinar kind of dashboard, and we'll do our best to answer those. So just give a 30-second pause to see if anybody has questions. And next what we're going to do is pass it over to Stephanie Monahan, our Early Childhood Director here at the Civic Canopy, to talk a little bit more about how the Early Childhood Colorado Partnership plans to use the framework and details going forward. And so I'm just going to advance the slide for you, Stephanie, and you should be unmuted, so you should be able to go for it.
Great. Thank you, Hannah. And thanks again, Cheryl. This is so great to be able to share such a detailed overview of how the updated framework came to be, recognizing all the stakeholder engagement activity that went into the refresh of this framework for us. It's very exciting, so thanks so much. I just want to quickly recap kind of the Early Childhood Colorado Partnership's mission is to advance the vision of the framework statewide by offering the space and conditions to bring together diverse and cross-sector partners to work together and identify common results, share best practices and kind of that learning community environment, and to work together at the individual organizational, community, and statewide level to implement strategies to improve our early childhood system, as well as driving change as we all work to ensure all of Colorado children are valued, healthy, and thriving. And so I think I hope I speak on behalf of the whole partnership that we are just thrilled that we have the updated framework as we think about the next phase in our journey working together. As most of you know, we've spent since 2008 really spending a lot of time working and supporting the implementation of the original framework and hope to do the same with the updated framework. We will spend the bulk of our time at the partnership meeting on October 26th to capture current contributions to the updated framework and really unearthing and identifying gaps to inform our next phase of work, as well as developing a network prioritized list of needs as we all hope to activate the framework. So as we kind of think about that, we wanted to ask just a few questions that will, I think, be really grounding for our partnership meeting on the 26th so that we can use everybody's time wisely and really get some high-level action steps moving forward. Next slide. Great, so we have a few questions for you all. I think next slide.
Just a moment. Oh, sorry, we've been muted. I just was speaking for about 50 seconds on mute. I apologize. So what's going to happen for polling is instead of a slide popping up, I'll kind of launch each question as a poll, and as participants, you should be able to click on your screen which answer you choose. Each question, we have 3 questions we'll go through, is a multiple choice answer, and you'll be able to choose one answer. We'll ask kind of an open-ended question at the end around where you'll be able to type in your answer in the chat box so we can all get a feel. But what I'm going to go ahead and do is launch the first question. So you should be able to see on your screen, hopefully. At this point, how well do you feel you are familiar with the framework? Somehow the question got cut off for me. But it looks like people are already putting in their answers. So whatever the last option you choose is going to be the one that you end up with. So I'll give everybody just a few more seconds to vote, and then I'll close the polling, and it should hopefully open up on everybody's screen. All right, I'm going to close this question. I should be able to share the poll results.
Great. So it looks like we have 33% have a high level of understanding, 60% have somewhat understanding, 7 with little understanding, and thank goodness 0 have no level of understanding. Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you guys for sharing that with us.
The next question will be, to what degree do you see the framework potentially strengthening framework or partnerships statewide? I'm going to launch it. And you should be able to see the options there and click on the option that most fits the degree to which you feel. Mm-hmm. Give it a few more seconds for anybody who wants to do last minute. And we'll close the poll.
Great. So to what degree do you see the framework potentially strengthening partnerships? 50% said very much, 37% somewhat, and 10% are neutral, and 3% said little, and 0 not at all. Thank you, guys.
We have one more multiple choice question, and then we have kind of an open-ended question that Stephanie will pose to everybody. So the next question will be, to what degree do you believe the framework defines the results of a well-functioning early childhood system? Launch it. Give it a couple more seconds for people. All right, and we'll close.
Great. 65% believed very much defines the results of a well-functioning early childhood system, 26% with somewhat, and 10% neutral, and 0 for both little and not at all. So thank you guys for answering these questions for us, and we do have one more, and then we will kind of close our first Lunch and Learn.
And so Stephanie, you'll have to say that one out loud because we weren't able to make a polling question.
Great. Give me just 1 second. Great. So our final question is, what is one thing that needs to happen by the end of 2015 to ensure the framework is implemented in a quality way? So if folks could enter kind of their initial thought in the chat box, we will capture that for everyone. So again, the question, what's one thing that needs to happen by the end of 2015 to ensure the framework is implemented in a quality way?
And the question will pop up on people's screens in just a moment. We'll give people just a couple of minutes to enter either in the questions box or in the chat box at the bottom of your dashboard. You should be able to type in your response. And we also did have a question of how many people are on this call, which might get to the polling numbers there, but we have 41 people on the call at this point, and about 80% of people were responding to those questions. So that's a solid number. So in terms of things that need to happen in 2015 to ensure the framework is implemented in a quality way, a couple. Eileen Auer-Bennett said a common understanding of what defines quality. There's never one thing. We have come so far and continued collaboration, and it will keep moving us forward. Early childhood counselors should connect their strategic plans to the framework to show how their work supports young children. Distribution and action, such as implementation gatherings, brainstorming with commitment to action at the end. People need to follow up and potential resources to support areas that need attention. For example, if people support with families, then they may need resources on how to support families specifically. That's a great one. Dissemination across a variety of early childhood systems and stakeholders. Local resources to allow for implementation. Needs to be presented at local early childhood councils and early childhood collaboratives to make sure everybody's aware. It needs to be shared and explained with individuals who work in programs with children and the families that bring their children to programs. Provide training for early childhood councils to embed the framework in their strategic plans and early childhood council work. That seems like a key one that keeps popping up. Getting the right people at the table with good communication, purposeful next steps. And that's 7 people in that group who are listening in. And also engaging K-3 partners in dissemination. So these are all really great options that will really help us set the stage for the 26th, the conversation. So Stephanie, you have anything to add to some of those ideas?
That sounds great. We really appreciate you all sharing as the steering committee for the Early Childhood Colorado Partnership kind of thinks and plans its next steps and how it can support this network, as well as helping councils and community collaboratives embed this work and kind of strengthen their efforts at the community level. So this was really helpful. We'll definitely be taking kind of a deeper dive into what that looks like when we're together on the 26th. So it will be really valuable to have you all there as we kind of see where there's current energy and passion and movement with the updated framework, as well as spending some time, seeking out where there might be less energy and really understanding why and how we can begin to address that, and also, start to prioritize these lists of needs. Training and kind of tools and resources, technical assistance to activate and mobilize around the updated framework. So really appreciate everybody's contributions today, and look forward to seeing everybody at Mile High United Way on the 26th of October. And just a heads up for those who won't be able to join in person that day, Hannah and myself are working really diligently at expanding our webinar options and opportunities so that folks can have a high level of engagement and participation in kind of this action planning, even if they can't attend in person. So stay tuned and look for more details around that, because it is very important to all of us that we really seek to engage and understand from all of our statewide partners how we can work together and support your efforts in realizing our updated framework.
Great, and we did have one question which was possibly answered through yours, but want to clarify if the next meeting on the 26th is open to the public, which it is absolutely open to anybody and everybody working and interested on behalf of young children. So we will be sending some more details about that meeting in terms of the agenda and that kind of thing later this week. So if you are not already on the general partnership email list, make sure to email us with this email provided, earlychildhood@civiccanopy.org, so we can make sure to add you to that ongoing email list of partnership activities. But yes, everybody is welcome to that meeting. So hope to see you all there. And is there anything else that Stephanie or Cheryl want to add as a closing before we wrap things up?
This is Cheryl. I would just chime in. Thank you for inviting me to participate on the Lunch and Learn today. You may know that the Early Childhood Colorado Framework was released by the governor on September 2nd, so we're just over a month after the release. We've had about 8,500 copies of the framework go out the door to local partners and coalitions, and so I don't know that they're in the hands of individual community members yet, but I think that there's hopefully a broad dissemination and you'll be seeing them pop up in your communities across the state. It's also important to keep in mind that this is a living document, and so for those of you who commented, oh, not sure where I fit or how useful it's going to be, those sorts of things, you know, there's though this is a framework and it's fairly broad and intentionally broad so that many community partners working throughout the comprehensive system can see themselves in it. And I'm sure I can relate, it takes a lot of time to digest. So hopefully, you know, people will continue to reflect on it and look at it and see themselves in it, try to see themselves in it and use it as a tool to communicate with community partners. Don't forget that there's resources available on earlychildhoodframework.org. You can download a lot of resources there if they're not flooding into your community. I know that Stephanie and Hannah and the partnership, in addition to councils, have posters and frameworks going out. So hopefully they'll be in your neck of the woods sometime soon and have these hard copy resources available for you. Thanks again for having me today.
Yeah, and since we do know a few people had issues accessing the webinar and may have jumped on late, we were able to record most of the webinar aside from the first couple of slides, so we'll make sure to follow up with the recording and the slides. The next Lunch and Learn will be November 3rd, I believe, on early childhood mental health, and you should have received that invite earlier in the week, so hope to see you at the next one as well. So with that, we will let everybody enjoy your afternoon, and thanks for joining.
Thank you.